The night was quiet, the air was cold, and the sky was filled with endless stars. On the edge of a small town lived a farmer named Ethan. He was a simple man, living alone in a wooden house surrounded by fields. Most nights were calm, but this night was different. This night carried something that would change his life forever. Ethan was walking back from his barn when he saw it. A bright light cut across the dark sky. It was not a normal shooting star. It was brighter, faster, and closer. The light screamed through the sky and crashed somewhere in the forest near his farm. The ground shook for a moment, and the animals in the barn cried in fear. Ethan stood still, his heart racing. "What was that?" he whispered to himself. He thought about ignoring it, but his curiosity was stronger. He grabbed a lantern, took his jacket, and walked toward the forest. Each step echoed in the silence. The night felt heavier, and the shadows around him seemed alive. But still he kept walking. When he reached the trees, he smelled something strange. It was like burned metal and smoke. The forest floor was broken and black, as if something huge had fallen from the sky. And then he saw it. A small silver pod was half buried in the dirt, glowing with weak blue light. Sparks jumped from its broken sides, and steam hissed out of its cracks. Ethan's eyes widened. He had never seen anything like it. Slowly, he stepped closer. He raised his lantern, and through a cracked window, he saw movement. A small figure was inside, curled up, trembling. At first, he thought it was a child, but then his breath caught. The skin was pale with a faint silver glow, and the eyes were larger than human eyes. The small figure looked fragile, weak, and terrified. The pod made a sudden noise, and the hatch creaked open. Smoke escaped, and the small figure fell out onto the ground. It was a little girl, no older than 7. Her hair was white like snow, and her thin arms shook as she tried to stand. She looked at Ethan with wide, glowing eyes. For a moment, time stopped. Ethan had so many questions, but the girl's face showed only fear and pain. She whispered something, her voice soft and broken. He could not understand her words, but he could understand her tears. Her knees gave way, and she fell. Ethan rushed forward and caught her. Her body was cold, and her heart was beating fast like a bird trapped in a cage. Without thinking, Ethan lifted her into his arms. She held onto his shirt, as if she did not want him to let go. Ethan looked back at the pod. He saw strange marks burned into the metal, symbols he could not read. But one thing was clear. This girl had been left here alone, abandoned. The thought sent a chill through his chest. Who would leave a child like this in the middle of nowhere? Carrying her carefully, Ethan returned to his farmhouse. The animals cried again as he passed, sensing something strange. He placed the girl on his bed and covered her with a blanket. She looked at him with tired, glowing eyes. She whispered again, but he shook his head gently. "I don't understand," he said softly, but he patted her hand, and she seemed to relax. Her small fingers curled around his. For the first time since the crash, she closed her eyes. Ethan sat beside her, unable to sleep. He looked at the strange child and felt something he could not explain. She was not human, that much was clear, but she was not a monster either. She was just a scared child, left to die, and he was the only one who had found her, the only one who could protect her. Outside, the night grew darker. The wind carried strange whispers through the trees. Ethan thought he saw shadows moving at the edge of his field. Something was out there, watching, waiting, but when he blinked, the shadows were gone. He shook his head and told himself it was only his imagination. Still, he locked the doors and kept the lantern burning. Hours passed. The girl slept peacefully, holding onto his hand. Ethan looked at her and whispered, "Who are you? Why are you here?" But she gave no answer. All he knew was that his life had changed. He had found something not from this earth, something precious, something dangerous. And deep inside, he knew the night was only the beginning. The morning sun rose slowly. Golden light touched the farmhouse, but inside the house the world had already changed. Ethan woke with stiff eyes, still sitting on the chair beside the small bed. The strange girl was still there, sleeping quietly, her silver skin glowing softly in the light. He almost thought it was a dream, but her hand still held his, proving it was real. When the girl opened her eyes, she looked around in silence. Her gaze stopped on Ethan, and she whispered something he could not understand. The words were not human, soft and musical, like wind passing through glass. But then she pointed at herself and tried again. "Lyra," she said. The sound was broken, but clear enough. Her name was Lyra. Ethan repeated it slowly. "Lyra." The girl nodded and gave a weak smile. It was the first time he saw her smile, and it struck his heart with warmth. She touched his chest lightly, as if asking who he was. "Ethan," he said. He tapped his chest, then pointed at her. "Lyra." She copied his gesture, repeating "Ethan" with a soft voice. In that small moment, two worlds began to understand each other. Ethan tried to feed her. He gave her bread, but she only looked at it with confusion. Then he brought warm milk, and she drank it quickly as if she had not eaten for days. When she finished, she whispered something again, words lost to him, but her eyes said everything. She was thankful, and she was safe. Yet, Ethan knew nothing about what she was or why she had fallen to earth. And deep inside, he feared someone might come looking for her. He did not know that the search had already begun. That night, when the farm grew quiet, Ethan heard strange noises outside. The cows in the barn stamped their hooves nervously, and the horses whinnied in fear. He stepped outside with his lantern, but the night was too dark. The trees at the edge of the field seemed to shift like black figures moving slowly. He tightened his grip on the lantern and whispered, "Just the wind." But his heart knew better. Back inside, Lyra sat by the window, watching the stars. She pointed at the sky, at a cluster of stars far away, and whispered something in her alien tongue. Ethan followed her finger, realizing she was showing him her home. Her voice carried sadness, and her glowing eyes shone with tears. It was clear she missed her family, yet she was also afraid of them. Ethan sat beside her and said softly, "You're safe here." Even if she could not understand every word, she seemed to feel the meaning. She leaned against his arm, small and fragile, but no longer shaking in fear. Later, when the moon climbed high, Ethan tried to sleep, but a loud metallic hum filled the air outside. It was not the sound of a car or a plane. It was colder, sharper, like machines searching. He grabbed his shotgun and rushed to the window. Red lights moved across the field like glowing eyes sweeping the grass. Strange flying objects hovered low, scanning the ground. His chest tightened. Someone or something was already hunting for her. He rushed to Lyra. She was awake, trembling, whispering in fear. The glow of her skin flickered like a candle about to go out. Ethan crouched beside her. "Stay quiet," he said. The machines outside buzzed closer, their red beams touching the walls of the house. The animals screamed again, banging against their stalls in panic. Ethan blew out the lantern, covering the house in darkness. He held Lyra close, his hand over her small shoulder. The red light passed over the windows, scanning for movement. For a moment, Ethan thought they would break in. But after long minutes, the machines drifted away, their hum fading into the night. Lyra shook in his arms, but her glowing eyes burned with fear and anger. She lifted her hands, and for a brief moment a spark of blue light shot between her fingers. Ethan froze. This child was not only different, she was powerful, and that power was the reason she was hunted. When the danger passed, Ethan lit the lantern again. He looked at her and whispered, "Why are they after you?" Of course, she did not answer in words he could understand, but she drew shapes in the air with her glowing finger. She drew a circle, then crossed it out, then pointed at herself. Her message was clear. She was rejected, unwanted, abandoned by her own people. They had left her to die, but others wanted her for her power. Ethan felt a weight in his chest. This child was not safe anywhere, not even on Earth. But as she held on to him with those small, glowing hands, he made a quiet promise to himself. He would not abandon her, Not now, not ever. And so the farmer and the alien child shared the same house. One man from Earth, one girl from the stars, bound together not by blood, but by the choice to protect. What neither of them knew was that the true danger had only just begun. The days passed slowly. Ethan tried to live as if life was normal, but nothing was normal anymore. Lyra was not like other children. She was quiet but curious, her glowing eyes watching everything he did. She followed him to the barn, touched the tools, and laughed softly when the chickens ran. For a moment, she almost looked like a normal child. But deep inside, Ethan knew she was not safe. At night, the strange machines came again. They hovered far away, red lights flashing across the forest. They never entered his farm, not yet. But each night, they came closer. Ethan could feel the net tightening. Someone was searching for her, and they would not stop. One evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched long across the fields, Ethan heard a metallic hum in the distance. He stepped onto the porch, shotgun in hand. Lyra stood behind him, clutching the doorway with glowing fingers. The hum grew louder, sharper, until it buzzed above the farmhouse roof. A dark drone circled in the sky. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its body was black metal, its wings spinning with silent blades. A red light beamed from its center, scanning the ground like a hungry eye. When it passed over Lyra, the drone screeched, its tone rising. Ethan pulled her back inside, heart pounding. The window shattered. Another drone smashed through the glass, metal claws stretching toward Lyra. Ethan fired his shotgun, the blast echoing through the night. The drone sparked and twisted, crashing onto the wooden floor. Its pieces twitched, wires spilling out like veins. But more were coming, their hum filling the air like a swarm of wasps. Ethan shouted, "Hide!" Lyra crouched under the table, trembling, her silver glow flickering. The farmer reloaded, fired again, and one more drone dropped. But they were too many. 2 drones forced open the front door, red lights sweeping through the room. Ethan swung the shotgun like a club, smashing one against the wall. Sparks exploded, filling the air with smoke. But then he froze. One drone aimed its sharp metal arm at Lyra. She screamed, and in that moment something inside her awoke. Her hands lit up with blue fire. A blast of energy burst from her palms. The drone exploded into 1,000 glowing pieces. The house shook, the windows shattered, and the lights went out. Ethan fell back, stunned. The girl he had promised to protect was not weak. She was powerful, too powerful. Her glowing eyes blazed like stars, and her small body shook with energy she could not control. For a moment, she looked less like a child and more like a storm wrapped in human shape. The remaining drones paused, as if scanning her power. Then they retreated, buzzing back into the dark sky. The house fell silent again, broken glass glittering across the floor. The only sound was Ethan's heavy breath and Lyra's soft sobs. He knelt beside her. Her small body trembled, her hands smoking faintly from the blue light. She looked at him with tears in her eyes, whispering something in her alien tongue. Though he could not understand the words, he understood her fear. She did not want this power. It was the reason she had been abandoned, the reason they hunted her. Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "You're safe," he whispered, even though his hands were still shaking. He looked at the destroyed drones on the floor. If these machines could find them, more would come, stronger, deadlier. This was only the beginning. That night, Ethan did not sleep. He repaired the broken window, loaded more shells into his shotgun, and kept the lantern burning. Lyra sat silently on the bed, her glowing eyes watching him with trust. She had destroyed machines stronger than anything he had seen, but she was still just a child, and Ethan knew she needed him, not as a fighter, but as a protector. Outside, the night was heavy and silent, but in the distance, faint lights moved again. The hunters had seen the blue fire, and now they knew where to look. The real attack had not yet begun. And deep inside, Ethan realized one truth. Protecting Lyra would not just be about keeping her hidden. It would mean standing against whatever wanted her gone. And he had no choice but to fight. The farmhouse was quiet after the battle. Broken glass covered the floor. The smell of smoke still hung in the air. Ethan sat by the fire, his shotgun resting against the wall. Lyra sat near him, wrapped in a blanket, her glowing eyes fixed on the flames. Her small hands still shook, faint blue sparks flickering on her fingertips. Ethan spoke softly. "Where are you, child? Why are they chasing you?" Of course, he knew she would not answer in his language. But something in her eyes told him she wanted to speak. She wanted him to understand. Lyra picked up a piece of coal from the hearth. On the wooden floor, she began to draw. Her glowing finger traced symbols that burned faintly like blue fire. First, she drew a tall figure, then smaller figures beside it. A family. Her face tightened with sadness. She crossed a line through the drawing, then pointed at herself. Her message was simple. Her family had left her. Ethan frowned. "Why?" he whispered, more to himself than to her. Lyra continued. She drew a circle of tall figures around her, all of them turning away. Then she touched her chest, and a burst of light flared from her hand. Her power. She lowered her head, ashamed, as if this gift was a curse. Her people had abandoned her not because she was weak, but because she was different, because she was powerful. Ethan's jaw tightened. The idea burned inside him. Parents leaving their child, a whole world rejecting her. He wanted to believe there was some mistake, but the truth was written in her tears. Lyra had been left to die, alone in the stars. And now others wanted to claim her power for themselves. He reached out and placed his rough hand over her small, glowing one. "You are not a curse," he said. "You are not alone anymore." She did not understand every word, but she felt the meaning. She leaned closer, resting her head against his shoulder. For the first time since she arrived, her trembling stopped. That night, Ethan dreamed of fire and shadows. He dreamed of Lyra standing in the middle of a battlefield, her small hands unleashing storms of blue light. And behind her were endless black shapes, her people turning their backs on her. When he woke, his chest was heavy. He looked at Lyra, still sleeping beside the fire. She looked peaceful, innocent, but he knew the storm inside her was real. The next morning, Ethan decided to test something. He took her to the empty field behind the barn. "Show me," he said gently, pointing to her hands. Lyra shook her head, afraid, but he nodded. "It's all right, I'm here." Slowly, she lifted her palms. Blue light sparked and crackled, swirling like lightning trapped in glass. Ethan stepped back, shielding his eyes as the air itself seemed to bend. The power was beautiful but frightening. She lost control for a moment, and the ground split open with a blast of energy. The earth smoked, the air hummed with static. Lyra fell to her knees, gasping. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She was terrified of herself. Ethan rushed to her side, pulling her into his arms. "It's not your fault," he said firmly. "You're just a child. This is not your curse. It's their fear." She clung to him, shaking, and in that moment, Ethan made a silent vow. He would teach her control. He would keep her safe, even if the whole universe wanted her gone. That evening, Ethan walked to the edge of the field. He saw the broken drones scattered among the grass. He thought of the hunters who had sent them. They would not stop. They would send more, stronger than before. And eventually, they would come themselves. When he returned, Lyra was sitting by the window, watching the stars. Her glowing eyes followed one particular cluster. She pointed at them and whispered something in her language. Her voice was full of longing. Ethan understood. Those stars were her home, the place that had abandoned her. "Family is not always blood," Ethan said quietly, standing behind her. "Sometimes it is the ones who choose to stay." She turned to him, not understanding every word, but she placed her small, glowing hand on his chest. She whispered his name, Ethan, and for him, that was enough. Outside, the wind carried a new sound. It was not the buzzing of drones. It was heavier, sharper, like metal tearing through the sky. Ethan stepped outside, his blood running cold. A streak of fire cut across the clouds, landing far in the forest. The ground shook again, and the animals cried out in panic. Lyra ran to the door, fear in her glowing eyes. She whispered quickly, pointing at the sky. Ethan understood without words. They had not only sent machines. Now they had sent someone alive, someone hunting her. The truth was clear now. Her own people had abandoned her because of her gift, but others had come to claim that gift for themselves. And Ethan knew that the Real fight was only beginning. The forest was heavy with silence. Ethan stood on the porch with his shotgun, his eyes fixed on the dark tree line. The crash from the night before still echoed in his mind. Something had landed, something alive. The drones were only scouts, but now the real danger had come. Inside the house, Lyra sat near the fire, her silver skin glowing faintly in the dim light. She could feel it too. Her glowing eyes flicked nervously to the door, and her small hands gripped the blanket tightly. She whispered Ethan's name in a trembling voice. He forced a calm smile, but his heart was pounding. "Stay inside," he told her. "I'll keep you safe." The night stretched on, and then he heard it. Heavy footsteps in the forest, slow and certain. Branches snapped under the weight of something large. Then a low metallic hum rolled across the air. Not the buzz of drones this time, but the deep growl of a ship. The trees at the edge of the farm swayed as a black vessel rose above them. Its body was long and sharp, covered in glowing symbols. It hovered silently before landing in the field, burning the grass beneath it. The door of the ship opened with a hiss. From the smoke stepped a tall figure, armored in dark steel, his helmet glowing with red light. On his back hung weapons Ethan had never seen. The stranger's voice echoed across the field, mechanical and deep. "Human," he said, "give me the child, and you will live." Ethan tightened his grip on the shotgun. He stood firm on the porch, his boots pressed into the wooden boards. "You're not taking her," he said, his voice steady though his body shook. The hunter tilted his head slowly, studying him like a wolf staring at prey. "You cannot protect what you do not understand," the alien replied. "She is dangerous, and she belongs to us." Behind Ethan, the door creaked. Lyra had stepped outside, her glowing eyes fixed on the hunter. She whispered something in her language. The alien hunter let out a low laugh. "She knows who I am. She knows what she is," he said. "She is a weapon, not a daughter, not a child." Ethan stepped in front of her, blocking the hunter's view. "She's not a weapon. She's a little girl," he said. "And on Earth, we don't abandon children." For the first time, the hunter's head lifted in surprise. Then the red glow of his helmet flared brighter. "You will die for her," he said coldly. The hunter raised his arm, and a strange weapon unfolded from his wrist. It fired a beam of red light, slicing through the wooden porch like paper. Ethan pulled Lyra back inside, diving behind the table as the beam cut across the room. Wood exploded, fire crackled, and glass shattered. The farmhouse shook under the attack. Ethan fired his shotgun, the pellets sparking harmlessly against the hunter's armor. The alien stepped closer, each heavy foot shaking the ground. Lyra screamed, her hands lighting with blue fire. A blast of energy shot from her palms, hitting the hunter's chest. He stumbled back a step, the glow of his armor flickering. But he did not fall. He straightened, laughing darkly. "Yes," he growled, "that is the power I came for." Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her toward the back door. "We have to run," he whispered. Together they sprinted into the forest, the hunter's heavy footsteps chasing behind. Branches whipped at their faces, roots twisted under their feet. The night air was alive with sound. The growl of the hunter's armor, the crack of his weapon, the pounding of their own hearts. Lyra stumbled once, nearly falling, but Ethan lifted her into his arms and kept running. The hunter's weapon fired again, burning a tree into ashes just beside them. Ethan's breath tore at his chest, but he refused to stop. Not while she clung to him. not while she whispered his name in fear. Finally, they reached a rocky clearing deep in the forest. Ethan put her down, panting. The hunter stepped into the clearing, his armor glowing red in the dark. "You cannot escape me," he said. "She is ours." Ethan stood tall, sweat dripping from his face, his shotgun nearly empty. But his voice was steady. "No," he said, "she's mine to protect, and I won't give her to you." Lyra's small hand slipped into his, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. She whispered something in her language, words Ethan did not understand. But he felt the meaning. Together, her power surged, blue fire sparking across her arms. The hunter lifted his weapon, ready to strike. But for the first time, Ethan did not feel fear. He felt strength. Together, man and child stood side by side, facing the darkness. The battle for Lyra had truly begun. The forest was silent again. The hunter had disappeared into the shadows, but Ethan knew he was not gone. The alien was watching, waiting, planning his next strike. Ethan and Lyra sat near a fallen log, both breathing hard. The child's glowing eyes flickered with fear, her small body trembling from the effort of using her power. Ethan brushed dirt from her hair and tried to steady his breath. He looked down at her and whispered, "They won't stop, will they?" Lyra shook her head slowly. She touched her chest, then made a circle in the air with her glowing finger. A signal for all of them. Her people, her hunters, the whole galaxy. They would never stop chasing her. The weight of that truth sank into Ethan's chest. He was only one man, a farmer with a shotgun, a small house, and nothing more. How could he stand against machines, soldiers, and hunters from stars? How could he protect her when even her own family had abandoned her? He turned his eyes to the night sky. The stars shone cold and endless above him. He thought about leaving her. If he gave her up, maybe the hunters would leave Earth in peace. Maybe he could return to his quiet life, his barn, his fields. But when he looked at Lyra, curled up beside him, her small hand clutching his sleeve, he felt the answer deep inside. He could not do it. He would not leave her. Not after all she had already lost. Lyra whispered his name. Ethan, her voice small and broken. He turned to her, and she pressed her forehead to his arm. She was not just asking for safety. She was asking for a family, a place to belong. And Ethan realized something powerful. This child was not his burden. She was his choice. His choice to protect, his choice to stand, no matter the cost. The next day, Ethan prepared. He repaired the broken shotgun, sharpened the old axe, and gathered food. He showed Lyra how to stay quiet, how to move quickly when danger came. She followed every instruction, her glowing eyes focused and determined. But she was still just a child. When she laughed at the chickens in the yard, she seemed normal, human, and that made Ethan's heart ache even more, because he knew the world would never see her as he did. Later that night, the hunter's voice returned. It echoed through the trees like thunder. "Human," the voice called, "you cannot run forever. I will give you one chance. Hand her over, and I will spare your life." Ethan stood in the yard, shotgun in hand, his jaw tight. He shouted back, "If you want her, you'll have to go through me." The hunter's laugh was cold and cruel. "Then you will die with her." The red glow of the hunter's ship lit the forest again. This time, more soldiers stepped out behind him, tall armored figures with glowing weapons. Ethan's blood ran cold. It was no longer one hunter, it was an army. He pulled Lyra close, whispering, "Stay behind me, no matter what happens." The soldiers spread out, surrounding the farmhouse. Lyra clung to Ethan's hand, tears welling in her glowing eyes. She whispered something fast in her language, shaking her head. Ethan didn't understand every word, but he understood her fear. She wanted him to let her go, to save himself. But Ethan knelt down and gripped her shoulders. "Listen," he said firmly, "I made my choice. I won't abandon you." Her tears spilled, but her small lips curved into a trembling smile. The night exploded into chaos. The soldiers advanced, their weapons firing red beams that burned the ground. Ethan fired his shotgun, the blast knocking one soldier back. Lyra's hands lit with blue fire, her power rising like a storm. The air shook as her energy clashed with the soldiers' weapons. Trees split, rocks cracked, the earth itself seemed to roar. Through the smoke, the hunter stepped forward. His glowing eyes locked on Lyra. "This ends tonight," he growled. But Ethan stood in his path, raising his weapon again. "You're right," Ethan said. "It does." Lyra's power surged higher, the blue fire surrounding her body like wings. She reached for Ethan's hand, and he did not pull away. The storm inside her no longer scared him, because he knew she was not a curse. She was hope. Together, they faced the army, human courage beside alien power. And in that moment, Ethan understood. His life was no longer about the farm, the quiet nights, or the safe routine he once knew. His life was now about this choice. The choice to protect a child the universe had thrown away. The choice to fight, even against impossible odds. The hunter raised his weapon, soldiers closed in, but Ethan and Lyra stood side by side, ready for the final stand that would decide both their fates. The night sky burned red. The hunter's ship hovered above the forest, its engines rumbling like thunder. Dozens of soldiers spread out in the clearing, their glowing weapons aimed at the farmhouse. Ethan stood tall with his shotgun, his boots firm in the dirt. Beside him, Lyra's small hand glowed blue, her eyes shining like two stars in the darkness. The hunter stepped forward, his armored frame towering above them. "You cannot win," he said, his voice cold and sharp. "Give her to me, and I will let you die quickly." Ethan tightened his grip on the gun. "You'll never take her," he replied, his voice steady. "On Earth, we don't throw away children." The hunter's laugh echoed across the clearing, cruel and heavy. "You are only human," he said. "What makes you think you can stop me?" Ethan looked at Lyra, then back at the hunter. "Because I'm human," he said, "and that means I'll fight until my last breath." The first shot fired. Red beams cut across the night, burning the ground where Ethan had stood a moment earlier. He rolled aside, firing his shotgun, the blast knocking one soldier back. Lyra lifted her hands, and a wave of blue energy erupted. The air rippled, the ground cracked, and 3 soldiers flew into the trees. But more came, their glowing weapons filling the forest with deadly light. Ethan fought with everything he had. He swung his shotgun like a club, dodging beams, striking down enemies. But he was only one man, and the soldiers were many. Lyra's power blazed brighter, wrapping around her like a storm. She screamed as the blue fire surged, lightning sparking through the clearing. For a moment, the alien army froze in fear. Even the hunter stepped back, his armor flickering under the force of her energy. But Lyra was still a child. The power was too strong, too wild. Her body shook, and her eyes filled with tears. She could not control it. Ethan rushed to her side, grabbing her hands. "Look at me," he shouted. "You're not alone, Lyra, I'm here." Her glowing eyes locked on his. Her power steadied, the storm bending instead of breaking. The wild lightning curved into a shield, wrapping around them both like a wall of light. Beams from the soldiers struck the shield and shattered harmlessly. Lyra's small voice whispered through her tears. "Together." Ethan nodded, his heart pounding. "Yes, together," he said. The hunter roared in rage. He charged forward, his massive blade glowing red. He swung at Ethan, but the shield burst upward, blocking the strike. Ethan stepped in close, firing his last shell point blank into the hunter's chest. The armor cracked, sparks flying. Lyra followed with a blast of blue fire that sent the hunter crashing into the ground. The clearing shook, the trees bent, and the soldiers hesitated. For the first time, they saw fear in their leader's eyes. Ethan pulled Lyra close, standing tall despite his wounds. He shouted across the battlefield, "She is not yours. She is not a weapon. She is a child, and she is mine to protect." Lyra's power surged one final time. Wings of blue light burst from her back, stretching wide across the clearing. The soldiers shielded their faces, their weapons falling silent. The hunter staggered to his feet, his armor broken, his voice filled with fury. "This changes nothing," he growled. "She will never be safe, not with you." Ethan raised his chin, blood on his face, but fire in his eyes. "Then I'll make her safe," he said. "That's what a father does." Lyra stepped forward, her glowing eyes fixed on the hunter. She lifted her small hands, but this time the energy was calm, controlled. A wave of blue light spread across the clearing. It washed over the soldiers, their armor flickering before they collapsed one by one. The hunter dropped to his knees, his red glow fading. Lyra's voice whispered like a song, words Ethan could not understand, but he knew their meaning enough. The light faded, the storm ended. The clearing was silent once more. The hunter lay broken, his army gone, his ship retreating into the sky. Ethan dropped to one knee, exhausted. Lyra ran to him, wrapping her arms around his chest. She whispered one word, trembling but clear, "Father." Ethan froze, his heart tightening. Then he smiled through his pain. He lifted her into his arms and whispered, "You're safe now, Lyra. You're home." The dawn came slowly, the sky painted with gold and red. The farmhouse was broken, the fields burned, but they were alive. Ethan stood with Lyra in his arms, watching the sun rise. He knew the hunters might return one day, but he also knew that he would always be ready, because he had made his choice, and nothing in the universe could change it. Sometimes, being human was the greatest power of all.